Sometimes heroes wear rags. No one in the great palace of Zahira would have believed it that golden morning, when Sultan Rashid al-Mansur mounted his black Arabian stallion and set off for the northern mountains with his retinue of guards. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city's golden domes, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that promised a perfect day for hunting. Rashid was known throughout the Sultanate as an exceptional horseman. At 32, he had tamed the wildest horses of the desert and ridden through terrains that would make even the most experienced warriors tremble. His imposing figure, with his crimson silk tunic fluttering in the wind and his turban adorned with an emerald the size of a pigeon's egg, was the very image of power and magnificence. But pride, as the elders of the kingdom well knew, always precedes a fall. The hunt had been successful. 3 deer and a wild boar hung from the guards' saddles when they decided to take a shortcut through the gorge of Jabal al-Nur, the Mountain of Light. It was a treacherous path, narrow and winding, where loose rocks could mean the difference between life and death. "My lord," warned Karim, the captain of the guard, a man with a gray beard and scars that told stories of 1,000 battles. "The path is dangerous at this hour. Shadows deceive the eye." Rashid dismissed the warning with a wave of his jeweled hand. "I have ridden through more difficult terrain, Karim. I will not allow fear to dictate my path." It was then that it happened. A snake, startled by the sound of hooves, emerged from among the rocks directly in front of the stallion. The noble animal, for the first time in its life, reared violently. Rashid, taken by surprise and perhaps too confident in his abilities, lost his balance. The world spun in a whirlwind of blue sky and gray rock. The Sultan's last coherent thought before darkness enveloped him was the irony that, after surviving 3 assassination attempts in the palace and 2 border wars, it would be a simple snake that would end his life. He fell down the precipice, his body bouncing against the rocks, his crimson tunic tearing, his jewels detaching and falling like shooting stars towards the valley. The shouts of his guards faded into the echo of the mountains as he rolled, fell, slid towards death. And then, everything went black. Amira had left before dawn, as she had every day for as long as she could remember. At 19, she knew every path, every stream, every cave on the southern slope of Jabal al-Nur, as if they were the lines on her own hand. She had to know them. Her survival and that of her grandmother depended on it. Her dress was a patchwork of mended fabrics, faded by the sun and constant use. Her bare feet, hardened by years of walking on stones and thorns, moved with the sure-footedness of a mountain goat. On her back, she carried a worn wicker basket, and at her waist, a small knife that had belonged to her father, the only thing left of him besides vague memories of a warm laugh and strong hands. Amira was a herb gatherer. She knew every medicinal plant that grew in the cracks of the rocks, the desert sage that cured fever, the wild thyme that relieved pain, the myrrh resin that healed wounds. She sold them in the small market of the village of Qaryat al-Jabal, the town at the foot of the mountain, where she lived with her grandmother Fatima, in an adobe hut that threatened to collapse every time the north wind blew. That morning, Amira had decided to venture higher than usual. She had heard from an old woman in the village about a rare plant, the moon's tear, which grew only in the most inaccessible heights and could be sold for enough money to buy food for an entire month. Her grandmother had been coughing more than usual lately, and Amira desperately needed to get proper medicine, not just the infusions she prepared herself. She was searching among the rocks, with the sun already high in the sky, when she heard the sound. First, it was a scream, distant and muffled by the wind. Then, the unmistakable sound of something heavy hitting against the rocks, again and again, like a macabre drum. Amira straightened up, her heart pounding. She knew that sound. She had seen goats fall, and once, a man who had drunk too much wine and gotten too close to the edge. Without a second thought, she ran towards the source of the sound, her feet finding purchase where others would only see loose stones. She rounded a rocky outcrop, and then she saw him. A man lay motionless on a small ledge, about 20 meters below. His clothes, though torn and stained with blood, were clearly of superior quality. Even from a distance, Amira could see the gleam of gold on his belt. A nobleman, she thought, or a rich merchant. Most people in her village would have kept walking. The rich were no friends of the poor. There were stories of peasants who had helped nobles only to be accused of theft or assault. But Amira was not like most people. Her father had taught her, before he died in the salt mines when she was only 7, that life was sacred. All lives. It doesn't matter if he's a sultan or a beggar, he had told her. We all bleed red. We all breathe the same air. And if you can help, you must. Amira began the descent. It was dangerous, even for someone with her experience. The rocks were loose, heated by the sun to almost scorching. More than once, her foot slipped, and she had to cling with her hands, feeling the sharp stones cut her skin. But she continued, meter by meter, until she finally reached the ledge. The man was alive, but barely. His breathing was shallow and erratic. He had a deep cut on his forehead, and his left arm was bent at an unnatural angle. Fresh blood stained the rocks beneath him. Amira worked quickly. First, she checked that he had no neck or back injuries that could worsen if she moved him. Then, carefully, she tore strips from her own clothes to make makeshift bandages. She used the water from her canteen to clean the head wound and applied a paste of herbs she always carried with her, a mixture of aloe and wild honey that prevented infection. The broken arm was more complicated. Amira found 2 straight branches and with more strips of cloth, improvised a splint. The man groaned in pain when she adjusted the bone, but he did not wake up. Now came the hardest part, getting him out of there. Amira was strong for her size. Years of hard work had forged steel muscles under her slender appearance. But the man was large, easily twice her weight. She could not carry him back up the way she had come down. She looked around and saw a solution. A cave, not far away, partially hidden by a rocky outcrop. It was not ideal, but at least he would be protected from the scorching sun and any wild animals. With superhuman effort, dragging and pushing, Amira managed to get the unconscious man to the cave. It was small but dry, and deep enough to maintain a cool temperature. There, she laid him on her own cloak, the only protection she had against the cold mountain nights. She spent the rest of the day caring for him. Every few hours, she moistened his lips with water. She changed the bandages when the blood soaked through them. She prepared fresh poultices with the herbs from her basket, and she waited. As night fell, when the stars began to appear like diamonds on the black velvet of the sky, Amira knew she had to make a decision. Her grandmother would be worried. She had never spent a night away from home. But if she left the man alone, he could die during the night. The decision was easy. She stayed. She lit a small fire at the entrance of the cave, both to warm herself and to keep away the jackals howling in the distance. She sat beside the man, watching his breathing, adjusting his position when he seemed uncomfortable, whispering words of encouragement, even though he could not hear her. "Don't give up," she told him. "Someone must be waiting for you. Someone must love you. Keep fighting." Sometime in the early morning, exhausted, Amira fell asleep with her back against the cave wall, her father's knife in her hand, ready to protect her patient from any danger. She did not know that the man she had saved was the ruler of the entire sultanate. She did not know that her act of kindness was about to change not only her destiny, but that of thousands of people. Sometimes heroes wear rags, and sometimes an act of compassion can move mountains. Rashid woke up with the taste of copper in his mouth and a throbbing pain that seemed to emanate from every fiber of his body. At first, he could not remember where he was or what had happened. There was only the pain, omnipresent and overwhelming. Slowly, like fragments of a broken mirror, memories began to return. The horse, the snake, the fall. He opened his eyes and saw stone above his head. Not the ornate ceiling of his alcove, with its frescoes of glorious battles and gardens of paradise. Just bare rock, stained with soot from a recent fire. He tried to move and groaned. His left arm was immobilized, tied with what looked like branches and rags. He raised his right hand and touched his forehead, feeling the rough bandage that covered it. "You shouldn't move yet." The voice startled him. He turned his head, too quickly, and a wave of dizziness hit him. When his vision cleared, he saw a young woman sitting near the entrance of the cave. The dawn light illuminated her from behind, creating a golden halo around her figure. She approached him with a clay bowl in her hands. "Drink," she said simply. "It's water with herbs. It will help with the pain. Rashid studied her as he drank. She was not beautiful in the conventional sense, not like the palace courtesans with their painted faces and perfumed bodies. Her skin was tanned by the sun, her hands calloused, her dark hair tangled and dusty. Her dress was so mended that it was impossible to tell what its original color had been. But there was something in her eyes, large and dark like inkwells, that captivated him. A sharp intelligence, an iron determination, and something else. Kindness. Genuine kindness, without expectations or ulterior motives. "Who are you?" Rashid asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. "My name is Amira. I found you yesterday, after your fall. You were badly hurt. Where are my guards? My horse?" Amira frowned. "There was no one else when I found you. Just you, falling down the mountain like a stone. You're lucky to be alive. The ledge where you landed was the only thing that saved you from falling to the bottom of the valley." Rashid processed this information. His guards must be looking for him. But in these mountains, with so many ravines and caves, it could take them days to find him, if they found him at all. "Why did you help me?" he asked, genuinely curious. The question seemed to confuse Amira. "Why wouldn't I? You were hurt. You needed help." "But I am a stranger. I could be dangerous. I could be a thief or a murderer," Amira shrugged. "You could be. But you were dying, and my father taught me that all lives are valuable." She paused, looking at him with an intensity that made him feel strangely vulnerable. "Besides, your clothes, though torn, are of quality. Your hands have no calluses from hard work. You are a nobleman or a rich merchant, not a common thief." Rashid almost smiled at her perceptiveness. "And aren't you worried that a nobleman might bring you trouble?" "Trouble will come or not, regardless of what I do. At least I can sleep knowing I did the right thing." There was a simplicity to her philosophy that Rashid found refreshing. In the palace, every action, every word, every gesture was calculated, measured, weighed for its possible political consequences. Here, in this cold cave with a girl who had nothing, he had found something he had forgotten existed. Kindness without an agenda. "I have to go back to my village," Amira said, standing up. "My grandmother will be worried. But I'll be back before noon with more water and food. Don't try to move too much. Your arm is broken and you have a serious head wound. If you move too much, you could make things worse." "Wait," Rashid said. "What is your name? Your full name?" "Amira bint Yusuf, from Qaryat al-Jabal." "Amira bint Yusuf," Rashid repeated, engraving the name in his memory. "I owe you my life. That is not a debt I take lightly." Amira looked at him with an expression he could not decipher. "You owe me nothing. Just get better. That will be enough payment." And with that, she disappeared into the growing light of dawn, leaving Rashid alone with his thoughts and a strange feeling in his chest, something he had not felt in years. Gratitude, humility, and the beginning of something he could not yet name. While Rashid rested in the cave, the entire sultanate was in chaos. Karim, the captain of the guard, had organized the largest search seen in decades. Hundreds of soldiers scoured the mountains, shouting the sultan's name, looking for any sign of his whereabouts. Bedouin trackers, known for being able to follow an ant's trail in a sandstorm, had been summoned from the desert. In the palace, the situation was even more tense. The sultana mother, Zahra al-Mansur, a 60-year-old woman with hawk eyes and an iron will, had convened the council of viziers in an emergency session. "My son cannot be dead," she declared, her voice firm despite the fear Karim could see in her eyes. "I would feel it if he were. He is injured, lost, but alive. You must find him." The Grand Vizier, Harun ibn Malik, a corpulent man with a carefully oiled black beard, bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, we have mobilized all available resources, but the mountains of Jabal al-Nur are vast. It could take weeks." "We do not have weeks," Zahra interrupted. "Every hour that passes without news of the Sultan is an hour in which our enemies can conspire. I have already received reports of suspicious movements on the eastern border. The Emir of Qadisiyah is testing our defenses." Karim, standing by the window, clenched his fists. It was his fault. He should have insisted more on taking the safe path. He should have been closer when the horse reared. He should have... Captain Karim. The Sultana mother's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Yes, Your Majesty. I want you to double the search teams. Hire all local guides, all hunters, all who know those mountains. Offer a reward, 1,000 gold coins for whoever finds my son alive. 500 if they only find... Her voice broke slightly. His body. It will be done, Your Majesty. But as Karim left the council chamber to organize the expanded search, he could not shake the feeling of hopelessness. The mountains were unforgiving. If the Sultan had fallen down one of those precipices, the chances of finding him alive were almost nil. Almost. For the next 5 days, Amira became Rashid's only link to life. Every morning before dawn, she made the arduous journey from her village to the cave, bringing fresh water from the spring, stale bread that she shared with him even though he knew it was probably her only meal of the day, and fresh herbs for his bandages. Rashid learned to await her arrival like a man in the desert awaits rain. At first, their conversations were brief, practical. She would ask about his pain, check his wounds, give him water. He would respond in monosyllables, still weak, still processing the fact that his life depended on a peasant girl. But gradually, as his strength returned, they began to truly talk. Tell me about your village, Rashid said one afternoon as she changed his bandages. Amira shrugged. There's not much to tell. Qaryat al-Jabal is small, perhaps 100 families. Most are shepherds or work in the salt mines. It's a hard life, but it's the only one we know. And your family? A shadow crossed Amira's face. My father died in the mines when I was a child. A collapse. My mother, her voice softened, died giving birth to my little brother. The baby didn't survive either. Now it's just my grandmother and me. I'm sorry, Rashid said, and he meant it. Life is like that, Amira replied with an acceptance that he found both admirable and heartbreaking. We take what we're given and do the best we can. Have you never wanted more? Rashid asked. To leave the village? To see the world? Amira laughed, but it was not a bitter laugh. With what money? With what means? Dreams are for the rich. The poor have to focus on surviving. Her words hit Rashid like a punch. He, who had traveled to distant lands, who had seen the great southern ports and the golden cities of the east, who had never had to worry about where his next meal would come from, suddenly felt ashamed of his ignorance. And you? Amira asked, interrupting his thoughts. You speak like an educated man. Your manners are refined, even injured and dirty. Who are you really? Rashid hesitated. Part of him wanted to tell her the truth, to reveal his identity. But another part, a part that was enjoying being just a man, not a sultan, not a symbol of power, wanted to keep the secret a little longer. I am a merchant, he lied. From the capital. I was traveling with my caravan when we got separated in the sandstorm. It was not a completely convincing lie, but Amira did not press. Perhaps she knew he was not telling the whole truth. Perhaps she did not care. Days passed. The fever that had threatened to take Rashid finally subsided thanks to Amira's infusions. His arm, though still painful, began to heal. The wound on his head closed, leaving what would undoubtedly be an impressive scar. And in those days, in that cold cave with only a poor girl for company, Rashid learned more about his own kingdom than he had learned in years of reports from his viziers. He learned that the taxes on salt were so high that mining families could barely afford to buy the salt they themselves extracted. He learned that the local governor, a man Rashid had personally appointed, rarely visited the remote villages, and when he did, demanded gifts that were little more than bribes. He learned that the justice system he believed to be equitable was, in reality, accessible only to those who could pay scribes and lawyers. He learned that there were children in his kingdom who had never seen a doctor, who died of diseases that were easily treatable in the capital. And he learned all this not through bitter complaints or angry accusations, but through Amira's simple, direct stories, told without malice, just as facts of life. Have you never thought of complaining? Rashid asked one night. Of asking the Sultan for help? Amira looked at him as if he had suggested flying to the moon. The Sultan? The Sultan lives in his golden palace, surrounded by his nobles and his guards. Why would he care about people like us? We are invisible to him." Her words were like a knife in Rashid's heart, because she was right. He had been so busy with court intrigues, with trade negotiations, with marriage alliances and territorial disputes, that he had forgotten the real people of his kingdom. He had reduced them to numbers and reports, to statistics of production and tax collection. He had forgotten that every number represented a life, a story, an Amira. "Perhaps," Rashid said slowly, "the Sultan doesn't know. Perhaps no one has told him the truth." "Or perhaps," Amira replied, her voice soft but firm, "he doesn't want to know. It's easier to rule when you don't have to look into the eyes of those who suffer from your decisions." Rashid had no answer for that. That night, as Amira slept near the fire, she had started staying the nights, saying the round trip was too exhausting. Rashid made a silent vow. If he survived this, if he returned to his palace, things would change. They had to change. On the morning of the 6th day, Amira arrived at the cave earlier than usual, her face pale with worry. "There are soldiers in the village," she said without preamble. "Hundreds of them. They are looking for someone, a nobleman who disappeared in the mountains." Rashid's heart quickened. What are they saying? That it is the Sultan himself, that he fell from his horse almost a week ago. They are offering a huge reward to whoever finds him. Amira looked at him, and Rashid saw the exact moment the pieces clicked into place in her mind. "You," she whispered. "You are—" "Yes," Rashid admitted. There was no point in lying anymore. "I am Rashid al-Mansur, Sultan of Zahira." Amira recoiled as if struck. Her face went through a series of emotions: shock, disbelief, fear, and finally, something that looked like betrayal. "You lied to me." "I protected you," Rashid corrected. "If you had known who I was, you would have acted differently. You would have been afraid, or you would have been too reverent. We wouldn't have been able to talk. Truly." "Talk," Amira repeated, her voice trembling. "I told you everything about my life, about my village, about our problems. And you are responsible for all of it." "I know," Rashid said, trying to stand despite the pain. "And I'm sorry. But Amira, listen to me. These days with you have opened my eyes. I have seen my kingdom through your eyes, and I am ashamed of what I have seen. But I can change it. I am going to change it." "The promises of the powerful are like the desert wind," Amira said bitterly. "Strong when they blow, but leaving nothing behind when they pass." "Then let me prove it to you. Come with me to the palace. Let me show you that not all promises are empty." Amira laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "Me? In the palace? I am a herb gatherer. A peasant. I don't belong in that world." "You belong where I say you belong," Rashid said, and for the first time in days, his voice carried the absolute command tone of a sultan. "You saved my life. That creates a bond that cannot be broken. Come with me. Please." Amira looked at him for a long moment. Rashid could see the internal battle in her eyes, the desire to believe against a lifetime of experience telling her that the powerful do not change, that promises are broken as easily as they are made. Finally, she shook her head. "No. My place is here, with my grandmother. Go with your soldiers. Go back to your palace. And if you really want to help, then help. But you don't need me for that." "Amira, I'm going to find the soldiers," she interrupted. "I'll tell them where you are. But after that, I don't want to see you again. Live your life, Sultan, and let me live mine." Before Rashid could respond, she had already left the cave, her quick footsteps echoing on the rocks as she walked away. Rashid was left alone, feeling a loss he had not experienced even when he fell down the precipice. An hour later, he heard voices, shouts, the sound of military boots against the stone. "Here, the cave." Karim was the first to enter, his face changing from anxiety to pure joy when he saw Rashid alive. "My Sultan," he said, falling to his knees. "Thanks to Allah. We feared." "I am well, Karim," Rashid said, though his voice sounded hollow even to his own ears. Thanks to a girl from the village. Amira bint Yusuf. Where is she? Did you bring her with you? Karim frowned. A girl showed us the way, my sultan. But when we offered to escort her back to the village, she refused. She said she had to take care of her grandmother and disappeared among the rocks before we could stop her. Of course she did, Rashid thought, proud to the end. I want you to find her, Rashid ordered. I want you to bring her to the palace. Her and her grandmother. Use force if necessary, but bring them. Karim looked uncomfortable. My sultan, if the girl does not want to come... It is an order, Karim. She saved my life. I owe her a debt that must be paid, whether she wants it or not. As you command, my sultan. But when the soldiers went to look for Amira, they discovered that she and her grandmother had disappeared. The hut where they lived was empty, their few belongings gone. Neighbors said they had seen them leave before dawn, heading south, towards the lands beyond the mountains. Amira had fled. And Rashid, for the first time in his life, understood what it meant to want something that money and power could not buy. Rashid returned to the palace as a hero. The streets of Zahira were filled with people celebrating the return of their sultan. Flowers rained from balconies, musicians played on every corner, and the air was filled with shouts of joy. But Rashid barely noticed. His mind was in a cold cave in the mountain, with a girl with dark eyes and calloused hands, with words that had changed something fundamental within him. The Sultana mother received him with tears of joy, embracing him with a strength he did not remember since his childhood. My son, she whispered. I thought I had lost you. I am here, mother, Rashid replied, hugging her back. And I have much to tell you. That night, after the palace doctors had examined his wounds and declared that he would make a full recovery, Rashid convened his council of viziers. Gentlemen, he began, his voice firm despite his weariness. My accident has given me a perspective I did not have before. I have seen our kingdom from below, through the eyes of those who suffer under our rule. And what I have seen shames me. The viziers exchanged uncomfortable glances. My sultan, began Grand Vizier Harun, no doubt your experience has been traumatic. Perhaps you should rest before making important decisions. No, Rashid interrupted. I have rested enough. It is time to act. I want a full report on taxes in the mining regions. I want to know exactly how much families are paying and how much of that actually reaches the royal treasury. My sultan, taxes are necessary for... I know what taxes are necessary for, Harun. But I also know that there are families who are starving while we eat from golden plates. That is going to change. Over the next few weeks, Rashid immersed himself in reform work. Every decision, every decree, was guided by a simple question. What would Amira think of this? He halved the salt taxes and established a minimum price that mining companies had to pay their workers. He dismissed the corrupt governor of the mountain region and appointed a young man known for his integrity in his place. He established free medical clinics in remote villages, funded by the royal treasury. He created a basic education system, where any child, rich or poor, could learn to read and write. He ordered wells to be built in villages that lacked clean water. Every reform faced resistance. Nobles complained that he was being too soft on the peasants. Merchants protested the new regulations that protected workers. Even some of his own viziers suggested that he was being reckless, that these changes would destabilize the kingdom. But Rashid stood firm. A kingdom is only as strong as its weakest people, he declared in a particularly tense council session. If our peasants are dying, if our children are malnourished, if our workers cannot feed their families, then we are not a strong kingdom. We are a golden facade on rotten foundations. Slowly, the changes began to take effect. Reports came in from the provinces. Fewer deaths from preventable diseases, fewer children working in the mines, more families with enough food on their tables. But despite all these achievements, Rashid felt an emptiness in his chest. Because all this time, he had not been able to find Amira. He had sent scouts, offered rewards, even traveled personally to Qariyat al-Jabal to look for her. But it was as if she had disappeared into the desert air. The villagers said she had left for the south with her grandmother. Some said they had gone to the coastal city of Mirab. Others swore they had seen them in the eastern mountains. Every clue turned out to be a dead end. It was as if Amira did not want to be found. And perhaps, Rashid thought in his darkest moments, she was right to flee. What could he really offer her? A place in the palace as what? A courtesan? A privileged servant? Amira was too proud to accept charity, too independent to live in a golden cage. But still, he could not stop looking for her, because he owed her more than gratitude. He owed her the truth of who he had become thanks to her. And because, although he barely dared to admit it even to himself, in those days in the cave, he had begun to feel something he had never felt for any of the princesses and nobles who had been offered to him in marriage. He had begun to fall in love. This story reminds us that compassion knows no social classes, that true leadership is born of empathy, and that a single act of kindness can have repercussions that transform entire nations. In a world that often values wealth and power over humanity, the story of Rashid and Amira teaches us that the most valuable things, love, justice, compassion, cannot be bought with gold, but must be earned through our actions and our choices.